I don't know what to write down. I asked Brian when I got here, he says, I don't know. These two want me to make it special. I drove here.
Friends, it's me, Meerab, and I welcome you to Starspill USA, and today we embark on perhaps the most extraordinary, shocking, and emotionally charged journey into the crumbling empire of the Brown family that has ever been told. A journey that demands patience, reflection, and a willingness to stare into the heart of a reality that has for years been disguised behind confessional interviews, edited sound bites, and a polished narrative carefully stitched together by TLC to project the illusion of unity, love, and a grand experiment in plural marriage. While beneath that shimmering surface there was rust, cracks, and a slow poison seeping into the very foundations of the family. For years, viewers like us were mesmerized by the saga of Kody Brown, the self-styled patriarch strutting with bravado as the orchestrator of a vast household. But now, with Christine gone, Janelle gone, and finally Mary walking away from the covenant of loyalty she once pledged, the illusion has shattered and only Kody and Robyn remain. The so-called perfect union, the last wife standing. The supposed soulmates who are meant to prove that even if the grand plural dream failed, there was at least one love story worth defending. And yet, as we peel back the curtain, what emerges is not a tale of enduring devotion, but of preference, secrecy, manipulation, financial ruin. And perhaps the greatest irony of all, being trapped in the very gilded cage they constructed for themselves. Let me take you inside that cage, that lavish Flagstaff mansion known to fans as the Churro Chateau, where the ceilings are high, the rooms vast, and the mortgage suffocating. A home that stands less as a sanctuary and more as a mausoleum for dreams turned rancid. And it all begins not with a dramatic family meeting or a televised argument, but with a letter. A certified letter from a bankruptcy court trustee delivered to Robyn's front door. A letter that, according to whispers from those allegedly close to the Brown legal team, confirmed what many suspected, but none dared say aloud, that the Browns had quietly entered a Chapter 13 bankruptcy proceeding nearly 8 months ago. And this was no simple debt restructuring, no ordinary attempt to buy breathing room. This was, in the words of one insider, a catastrophic financial event. A moment where the illusion of stability collapsed under the weight of debt, ego, and reckless ambition. Imagine the scene. Robyn clutching that letter, her face pale, the gilding on her carefully crafted identity beginning to flake away. The whispers of financial ruin echoing through those cavernous halls. While Kody, who once boasted of leading his family into prosperity and security, now found himself exposed as a man who had wagered everything and lost. For the truth is the TLC money, while once generous, had been divided among fewer and fewer wives as each departure occurred. Yet the expenses remained monstrous, the Coyote Passland bleeding money, the Churro Chateau devouring monthly payments, and Kody's vanity projects devouring what little remained. And here lies one of the cruelest twists of all. For in his desperation to reinvent himself, Kody embarked on ventures that can only be described as delusional. A high-end firearms accessory company that never saw daylight. A sovereign man wellness supplement line doomed from conception. And an app designed to manage complex family logistics, bitterly ironic given his spectacular failure to manage his own. Each venture bled more cash, each failure eroded more hope, until the image of Kody as rugged patriarchal thought leader dissolved into the reality of a man flailing, borrowing and raging, a man drowning in red ink. Within those walls, tension mounted, resentment festered, and the atmosphere grew so poisonous that neighbors allegedly overheard screaming matches drifting into the night air. Arguments that on the surface were about groceries or electricity bills, but in truth were about betrayal, lost fortunes, and shattered dreams. For every fight about leaving a light on was really about the looming threat of power disconnection. Every quarrel about overspending on shopping was really about the $50,000 sunk into an investment that yielded nothing but shame. And behind it all was Robyn, the wife who had once been positioned as fragile, weepy and dependent, but who, according to those who have studied her patterns, was beginning to feel the mask slip. Once she could retreat into the safety of believing Dad has a plan. He always does, as she reportedly told her children. But denial soon fermented into bitterness as the reality of collection notices piled higher and higher. And Cody, stripped of the grand identity of patriarch of a sprawling polygamous clan, reduced to being merely the husband in a suffocatingly monogamous arrangement, began to turn his fury inward, blaming Robyn for everything. The isolation, the debt, the endless demands for a bigger house. The strategy of monopolizing his time by emphasizing the needs of the youngest children. And most damningly, the manipulation of his emotions through endless tears. With Christine thriving in remarriage and television spin-offs. With Janelle traveling and living independently. With Mary carving her own niche through her bed and breakfast. Each of Cody's discarded wives shone brighter in their autonomy. And Cody sank deeper into his sense of failure. Trapped with the one wife he now increasingly viewed as the architect of his ruin. The breaking point, according to whispers, came in a moment of public humiliation when Cody was seen pacing furiously in his front yard, screaming into a phone. Neighbors overhearing him roar, "They took everything. I have nothing left to give. Not to Christine, Janelle, or Mary, but to a loan officer denying him a critical line of credit." And when he returned inside instead of comfort, Robyn allegedly confronted him for embarrassing them in front of neighbors, sparking a volcanic argument that tore through the chateau for hours. A confrontation where for the first time Cody unleashed his narcissistic rage fully upon Robyn, accusing her of being allergic to work and treating him as nothing more than a bank account. And Robyn, unable to diffuse him with trembling lips and tears, finally erupted herself, screaming that he was a failed leader, a man who had destroyed the family, squandered the dream, and left her isolated without the sisterhood she had once sacrificed everything for. This argument was no ordinary fight, it was a rupture, a moment when unspeakable truths spilled into the open, when the delicate fabric of their codependency shredded beyond repair, leaving a household of icy silences, frightened children, and an invisible war zone within those ornate walls. Dayton, Aurora, and Brina retreated into isolation. Solomon and Ariella were shielded as best as possible. Yet even they could feel the Cold War vibrating through the home. And it is within this toxic crucible that the most chilling revelation emerges: the secret recording. For if Cody believed Robyn would forever protect him, he was wrong, for Robyn, ever the survivor, allegedly placed her phone upon the kitchen counter, obscured by a fruit bowl, and pressed record on the very day she broke to him the devastating news that Coyote passed. The land of dreams was officially entering foreclosure. What followed, according to insider accounts of those who claim to have seen excerpts of this tape submitted later as evidence, was an hour-long tirade of incoherent roaring, granite counter slamming, paranoid blaming of banks, government, and ex-wives, and most disturbingly, unfiltered rage directed at Robyn herself, captured forever in the cold, unforgiving clarity of digital audio, an artifact that may one day resurface in divorce court, custody hearings, or leak to the public. Proof that the image of the doting patriarch and soft-spoken queen was nothing but theater concealing a toxic implosion. And so we stand at this precipice, viewers and chroniclers alike, forced to reconsider everything we once thought we knew about Cody and Robyn. To see them not as lovers who withstood the collapse of polygamy, but as co-conspirators in their own downfall. Trapped by ego, finance, and facade, their empire dissolving into dust while the world watches. And the question that now lingers, haunting and unrelenting: is this when the Shiro Chateau finally stands empty? When the Coyote Pass dream is auctioned away? When the recordings are unsealed, what will remain of Cody and Robyn Brown? The so-called soulmates of sister wives accept the ruins of a story that was always more tragedy than love. Story that was always more tragedy than love.
That we're renting this.
I'm just being creative and a little bit argumentative here with Janelle, but the whole point is I want to get her into a home. And
Christine and Janelle with their lawyers, with their demands, their petitions, their calculated exits. Cody saw them as predators, leeches who bled him dry. Women who took not only his wealth but the respect he once commanded, and in his mind, They had succeeded because the empire he once ruled had now turned to ash. At the beginning of the secret recording, Robyn's voice is said to be calm. Oh, almost goading. A tone that, rather than soothing, had the effect of fanning flames. "Cody, it's not their fault," she reportedly says, her voice steady. "We made investment mistakes." Those words, investment mistakes, were the spark that ignited the inferno. For in attempting to shield the other wives from his venom, she inadvertently turned the full weight of his fury upon herself, transforming them from husband and wife into combatants. His reply was a bellow, a roar dripping with venom. "Investment mistakes. You were the biggest investment mistake I ever made." His voice reportedly echoed through the house with the power of a man possessed. "I was a king before I met you a king. I had a family. Messy, chaotic, but it was mine. I had their respect. Maybe not their love, but their respect." The transcript reveals his tone lowering, his words sharpening into a growl that must have sent shivers through the room. "Then you came along with your 3 children and your mountain of debt. With your tears and your visions from God, you sold me a bill of goods, Robyn. You sold me soulmates, destiny, divine confirmation." Robyn attempts to interject, the transcript notes, her voice breaking as she whispers, "Cody, that's not fair. I loved you. I sacrificed everything for you." But Cody only laughs, a bitter, ugly sound that reverberates like the crack of glass under pressure. "Sacrificed. You sacrificed nothing. You upgraded. You stepped into a family already built, a throne already established, and overnight you became the queen. You whispered poison into my ear for years. Christine is mean to me. Cody, Janelle doesn't respect our rules. Cody, Mary is just too much drama. Cody, you pushed and pulled, isolating me until it was just you. You cut me off from everyone else and I let you." The crescendo of the tape comes as his voice breaks, not with tenderness, but with fury and despair. A howl from the wreckage of a man who once thought himself unbreakable. "And now look at us. We have nothing. The land is gone. The money is gone. The family is gone. My legacy is a joke. I'm a laughingstock. And it's all because of you. You and your Black Widow's soul. You drain the life, the money, the spirit out of everything you touch. And when the host is dead, you cry and play the victim. Well, the host is dead, Robyn. Dead. That was the climax. The point where every carefully crafted pretense of their eternal love story went up in flames. The moment the divine romance was re-scripted as a hostile takeover, the soulmate fantasy revealed as a trap. And Robyn captured it all. Every chilling word. Every jagged syllable. What followed inside the Shiro Chateau was silence. The eerie, suffocating silence of a Cold War. For days, according to those who whispered of the aftermath, Cody moved into a spare bedroom. His communications between husband and wife reduced to curt text messages exchanged beneath the same roof. Robyn, meanwhile, held her trump card close. The recording, the proof. The weapon she believed would secure her survival. Her next move was as deliberate as it was desperate. She did not file for divorce immediately. Instead, she sought legal counsel, hiring a lawyer whose reputation, we are told, was nothing short of predatory. A shark circling blood in the water. With her new legal armory, she filed not for divorce, but for an emergency restraining order against Cody Brown. Her petition, described to us by someone who claims to have seen its contents, painted a chilling portrait. A wife in fear for her life and the safety of her children. A woman trapped in a house with a man whose mind had fractured under the weight of failure. She pointed to his words Black Widow's soul as evidence of his deteriorating state, his dangerous volatility. Exhibit A. The recording was submitted as irrefutable proof of verbal and emotional abuse. This, she believed, was her masterstroke, her checkmate. With it, she imagined she would have him expelled from the chateau, gain sole control of what remained of their assets, and most crucially, cast herself before the world as the victimized survivor, the brave mother who endured the rage of a collapsing patriarch. But here is where reality television meets the unforgiving reality of the courts. Robyn expected applause, sympathy, validation. What she received was the icy impartiality of a Flagstaff judge with decades of experience in cutting through theatrics. There were no producers to side with her, no cameras to capture the trembling lip, no audience primed to weep with her. What unfolded, according to insider accounts of the closed hearing, was nothing less than the vivisection of their relationship under the cold fluorescent lights of a courtroom. The hearing itself was stark. No glitz, no fanfare. On one side sat Robyn, conservatively dressed, her face carefully arranged into sorrow and fear, flanked by her expensive attorney. On the other sat Cody, disheveled, hollow-eyed, represented not by a high-profile litigator but by a weary court-appointed advocate. For by now, the king of polygamy could not afford his own counsel. The centerpiece was, of course, the tape. Excerpts were played aloud, the venomous words echoing through the sterile chamber. Black Widow's soul, the biggest investment mistake. I was a king before you. Any observer would think it a slam dunk, and indeed, Robyn's lawyer presented it as such. When Robyn took the stand, her tears flowed, her voice trembled. As she spoke of locking bedroom doors at night, of children frightened, of her fear that his verbal tirades would soon turn physical. It was a performance perfected over years, but this time her audience was not fans. It was a judge. When Cody finally spoke, his defense was weak, his voice more pitiful than powerful. He admitted the words, admitted the fury, but insisted they were born not of violence, but of despair. The lament of a man crushed under the collapse of his family, not a monster poised to strike. He painted himself as broken, not dangerous. It seemed at first glance an argument doomed to fail, and then the judge began to speak. According to our source, the judge's line of questioning altered the entire trajectory of the hearing. She did not dwell on the volume of Cody's rage, but on the substance of his words. Calmly, methodically, she turned to Robyn. Mrs. Brown, this recording, you made it in secret. Robyn nodded. Yes. And you began recording before your husband entered the room. Again, yes. The judge pressed further. So you anticipated a confrontation? Robyn faltered, insisting she was merely afraid and wanted evidence. But the judge's tone remained sharp, dissecting without emotion. She pointed out that Cody's tirade, vile as it was, revolved around finances, about property loss, investments, failed ventures. Was this not, the judge implied, the argument of a desperate man railing against ruin rather than a man plotting harm? In that moment, Robyn's carefully woven narrative began to unravel. What she had cast as the testimony of a battered wife was being reframed by the bench as the desperate outburst of a broken patriarch. And as the questioning deepened, the perfect mask Robyn had worn for over a decade began. For perhaps the first time in public, to truly crack. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable, and in that instant, the sterile Flagstaff courtroom seemed to shift. The air grew heavy, the tension almost physical. Every person in the room, lawyers, clerks, even the handful of observers, knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. Is it fair to say, the judge began, her tone calm but edged with steel, that the root of this specific explosive argument was financial distress? Her words sliced through the silence like a blade. Robyn, visibly unsettled, shifted in her chair. Cornered by the precision of the question, she faltered for the briefest moment before giving the only answer available to her. Yes, she said softly, her voice quivering just enough to sound vulnerable. But it was his anger that frightened me. The judge, however, was not moved. I understand, she replied, her voice steady and stripped of sympathy. But let us examine the substance rather than the volume. Your husband accuses you of isolating him from his other wives and children. He frames your relationship not as a sacred covenant, but as a financial and social arrangement and investment that has now collapsed. He says, I was a king before I met you. You convinced me to cut them off, and now we have nothing. Those are not the words of a man plotting violence. Those are the words of a man rewriting a business deal that has soured. Would you not agree? Before Robyn could answer, her lawyer sprang to his feet with a sharp objection. But the judge silenced him with a single wave of her hand, the authority in her gesture absolute. For a moment, the entire court seemed suspended in a silence so thick it was almost suffocating. This was unprecedented. The judge wasn't viewing Robyn through the familiar lens of a battered wife narrative. She wasn't entertaining the role Robyn had rehearsed so carefully. Instead, she was dismantling it piece by piece, recasting Robyn not as a victim, but as a calculating partner in a failed enterprise, one now attempting to weaponize a private meltdown like minutes from a gall, like minutes from a disastrous shareholder meeting. And then came the true bombshell. The judge's eyes narrowed as she spoke again. "I have listened to this recording several times," she said, her words deliberate and weighty. "And while your husband's tone is appalling and his language inexcusable, your voice, Mrs. Brown, is not that of a woman in mortal terror. It is calm, it is measured. At times it is even provocative. You correct his narrative. You challenge his account. That is not the sound of a wife cowering from danger. It is the sound of a dissatisfied partner negotiating terms." The courtroom froze. A collective intake of breath could be heard as Robyn's carefully constructed mask of fear began to crack. For years, viewers of Sister Wives had whispered about manipulation, about crocodile tears, about the convenient timing of Robyn's breakdowns. But here, in the solemn quiet of a court of law, a judge had said aloud what millions had only dared to speculate. Robyn's victimhood was, at best, a performance and, at worst, a strategy. When the verdict finally came, it landed like a thunderclap. "The request for a permanent restraining order," the judge announced. Her voice, unflinching, "is denied." Gasps rippled through the room. But she did not stop there. What followed was less a ruling and more a brutal autopsy of the Brown marriage. "What this court has been presented with," she continued, each word as sharp as a blade, "is not a clear case of domestic abuse. It is instead the final act in a saga of mutual destruction between two individuals who entered into a toxic arrangement. The recording you have offered is not evidence of imminent danger. It is evidence that your so-called epic love story was, in truth, a business transaction that has now gone bankrupt." Her gaze turned first to Cody. "Mr. Brown, your behavior is abhorrent. Your narcissism, your volatility, and your self-pity are woven through every word on that tape. You are a man who built a kingdom, squandered it, and now lashes out at the ashes. You call yourself a king, but you are no such thing. You are a man with no crown, no subjects, and no castle." Cody's shoulders slumped. For years he had clung to his patriarchal identity, his delusion of grandeur. In this moment, under the judge's cutting words, the illusion evaporated. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't even a husband. He was a relic of a crumbled dynasty, humiliated before strangers. Then came Robyn's reckoning. The judge's eyes bore into her, stripping away the layers of carefully curated fragility. "And Mrs. Brown," she said coldly, "your attempt to manipulate this court has backfired spectacularly. You have not presented yourself as a victim, but as a co-conspirator in a long-running emotional and financial scheme. You demanded a monogamous marriage bankrolled by the resources of a plural family. You wanted the king, but not his kingdom. You benefited from isolating him. And when the resources dried up, you attempted to discard him and play the role of the frightened wife. That is not abuse. That is opportunism. This is a divorce matter, not a criminal one." Case dismissed. The silence that followed was suffocating. The kind of silence that swallows every sound and lingers long after the gavel has fallen. Robyn sat frozen, her face ashen, the mask of fear replaced with the stark horror of being unmasked. Cody, though spared the humiliation of a restraining order, had been stripped bare, reduced from patriarch to pauper in the span of a single hearing. Yet it was Robyn who had suffered the crueler blow. She had gambled everything: her reputation, her narrative, her very identity, in the hope that her tears and tape would save her. And instead, in the harsh, unflinching light of legal scrutiny, it all collapsed. From that moment forward, their so-called epic love story was over. not merely in the hearts of viewers, but in the cold language of a court record. The judge had accomplished what years of speculation could not. She had declared their union not a romance, not a divine destiny, but a failed business arrangement. A merger gone bankrupt, a contract torn to shreds, and now both Cody and Robyn were left standing amidst the wreckage. Stripped of illusions, with nothing left but the ruins of the empire they had once built together.